based in Budapest, Teradazome's regional office. If you can hear me well, could you please write something to me in the chat box? Okay, wonderful. So I'm very happy to welcome you to this webinar on refugee and migrant crisis, where we share the German experience. And before we start, I would like to give a very brief overview of the platform in case it is the first time for any of you when you are using this Adobe platform. So unfortunately, you will not have microphones switched on. So in case you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box that you're already using now. Please pay attention to the polls. We already had one where we asked you how you learned about the webinar. Thank you very much for answering the question. And we will have some more polls later on, so just please keep an eye on them. In case you lose the sound, please make sure your speaker icon is green. It's located on the top black bar. And also next to it, you can see an icon of a man with a raised hand on the same black bar. And you can use that one to show your emotions or suggestions, to ask to speak louder or anything similar. You can test it now if you wish. And before I give the floor to our speaker, I would like to say a couple of words about the presenters. So first, we will have Mr. Henning Bahr, who is a lawyer from Germany. And his main working fields are migration law, environmental law, and criminal law. And within these domains, he gives lectures and publishes contributions to professional literature. And then we will have Miss Nadia Potthast, who has a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work, and she's been working in Berlin in the area of refugee support in various ways, including with unaccompanied minors since 2012. And she's also the founding member of the association Angehört, which specializes in providing the information to people in reception centers about the interview during the asylum process. And now I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Henning Bahr. And if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat and we will answer them. Thank you very much, Mr. Henning. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Evgenia. Welcome everybody to this webinar, which I must admit is my absolute premiere, so I hope everything runs fine. I will tell you something about the asylum procedure in Germany. I will give an overview over administrative proceedings, decisions, forms of decision, and legal protection. It's always a little bit difficult to translate all the legal terms from the German legal language to English, but I hope it will run fine. Otherwise, please ask. So that didn't work very well, so that's better. The first question I'd like to ask you is which possible ways you know to immigrate to Germany. If you have any ideas. If you have no idea, maybe you won't write anything, but it would be very helpful. Well, we have here the first answers. They are quite correct. We have different ways of possible ways to migrate to Germany, which I would like to present now, if it would work. There are, in general, 3 different ways of possibly setting the own place of living to Germany. The first door, you might say, is for the EU citizens, the right of free movement according to community law, which only suits for EU citizens and their relatives in the smaller family, so parents and so on. The next possibility to migrate to Germany is via regular visa proceedings, which is conducted at the embassy or at German consulates. And that is the way of migrating if you come for studies, for work, or for family reunion with German relatives, especially if someone married a German person, or if there are children in other countries. You have to separate the family reunion to Germans and to other people from other states from the family reunion which is conducted to EU citizens. EU citizens who decided to live in Germany have a much easier access to family reunion, even as Germans have. And the last point, which is what we want to discuss here today, is the door via the asylum procedure, the door seeking international protection, where the so-called BAMF, BAMF, which is the Federal Office of Migration and Refugees, called Bundesamt für Migration und Flüchtlinge, who conducts the asylum proceedings with the aims of political asylum, acceptance as a refugee according to the GRC, or subsidiary protection, which is also regulated in the GRC, the Genevian Refugee Charter. You start asylum proceedings, you initiate asylum proceedings by uttering the wish to apply for asylum at any authority at the German borders or within the German borders. There are special rules for the border authorities, the police, and for the immigration or foreigners offices, which are within the German borders, to relay any person who utters the wish to apply for asylum to the proper office, which is the federal office, the Bundesamt, to conduct the asylum procedure. Any other authority in Germany will first try to redirect someone who utters the wish for asylum to one of these authorities or directly to the Bundesamt if they know about the whereabouts of the asylum proceedings. Anyone who utters this wish is provided with a proof of registration as an asylum seeker. This is a certain document called, and I wrote the German name in the presentation, as normally all the documents that are used in German administration have very long and difficult names, and normally they are abbreviated. In this case, with the abbreviation BÜMA, and it relies on this. It's a quite new situation that the BÜMA, which was normally only a paper which was valid for a couple of days, in the actual situation it has its own legislative act to be a proper document as for identification. The authority where the wish is uttered orders the asylum seeker to show up at a registration center that is assigned to the responsible branch of the BAMF, the Bundesamt. You have to know that Bundesamt is a federal office which has branches in very, very many cities, and with all the branches where the asylum proceeding is conducted, normally there is a registration center and accommodation where the asylum seekers can utter their applies. You have to difference. There's a difference between uttering the asylum the wish to apply for asylum, or to apply for asylum itself. I will describe the difference later on. But at the moment, it is the not very good situation that even after people showed up at the registration center, which is assigned to the responsible branch of BAMF, they normally wait quite a long time, sometimes weeks, mostly months, for the proper appointment for the formal apply for asylum. And in this time, they only have the BÜMA. I think Nadia will later on tell you something about the situation in the accommodations and at the registration centers. When the BAMF appoints a date for the formal apply for asylum, then they start the formal asylum procedure. Everything what is before, Bundesamt often even doesn't even have some files about the asylum seeker, because the file is created with the formal apply for asylum. From this date on, the formal asylum procedure starts. With the apply, at that date, the asylum seeker submits the application for asylum, which contains quite a lot of different things. It contains as well the application as to be recognized as to have the right of political asylum according to the German Grundgesetz. It contains the recognition as a refugee according to the GRC, as well as subsidiary protection. And it contains the apply for national protection against deportation, for example, because of illnesses, or because illnesses that cannot be treated in the home country, or because of situation in the home country which does not go along with the European Charter of Human Rights. At the date, normally there is a documentation of physical records. The Bundesamt makes photos and fingerprints, even if the asylum seeker has already been documented with the police or the border police, because in Germany, for reasons I cannot understand, the IT systems the IT systems used by the federal police and the police of the federal states does not work together with the IT system from used by Bundesamt. Therefore, the documentation mostly has to be at least twice, sometimes 3 times, or even more. And normally with the first appointment, with the formal apply for asylum, there's a first interview about personal data, the travel route, and former asylum applications. Normally this interview is combined with the personal interview concerning the Dublin regulation, which I will present to you in the next steps. After the formal apply for asylum, the asylum seeker receives the so-called Aufenthaltsgestattung, which is a preliminary residence permit. It states that the residence and that the residence in German is legal for the reason of the asylum proceedings. It is not a real residence permit, but it states a legal stay in Germany. And during the asylum proceedings, the asylum seeker, the applicant, has the obligation to inform Bundesamt about any relocation or any change of address, because it is his obligation to make sure that Bundesamt can reach him via postal service with any invitations or any information Bundesamt wants to give him or wants to ask from him. And at this state of the procedure, there is our next question. What kind of procedure do you think is possible at the moment? It is possible to give more answers than one. Okay, I think everyone... No, not yet. But I think we have a certain picture. I think we have a certain picture to stay with this. I will end the poll right now. And we will check on the answers. Only 2 of the 4 answers are correct, and the incorrect answers are answer number 1 and answer number 4, because the application can't be rejected at this state of the proceedings because the main interview hasn't been conducted yet, which will follow. We only have a first informational interview, which leads to the second possibility of the decision, because after the first interview, it is possible for Germany to check if Germany is responsible for the asylum procedure according to the Dublin regulations. It is also correct that the Bundesamt can conduct the so-called rapid procedure with a positive decision only by questionnaire without an interview, which was mainly used in the last year for Syrian citizens, because if somebody made the Bundesamt believe that he is from Syria, and there's proof that he is from Syria, especially via national passport, then it was possible that Bundesamt just hands him a questionnaire with certain questions, especially about his experiences in Syria and maybe knowledge about war crimes or terrorism. And after the Bundesamt evaluated the questionnaire, there was a very quick decision, a positive decision. As you can see, no decision is not an option at the moment. How do I get rid of this now? Thank you very much. So, we have to take a look at the so-called Dublin decision. There is the Dublin regulations, which you might have heard of, that regulate the asylum proceedings within the whole European Union. The aim of the Dublin proceeding was, the Dublin regulations was that refugees or asylum seekers shall be dealt with in the member state where they first applied for asylum, or where they have certain ties to that member state. That is always the case if in that member state already live recognized refugees that are close relatives to the asylum seeker. If that is not the case, normally another member state than Germany is in charge of the asylum proceedings if the asylum seeker already applied for asylum in another EU state, and there it is not too important if the asylum proceedings ended or if they were suspended. Um, it is even sufficient if the applicant was registered by the authorities in another EU state, or if he entered Germany with a visa from another EU state, or if he even spent a longer period of time in another EU state. If Germany deems itself not responsible for the asylum proceedings, the apply is rejected as inadmissible. So Germany says it is not allowed to make the asylum apply in Germany because the asylum apply has to be dealt with in another EU country. The time limit for a written apply at court as well against the decision itself as against the danger of immediate deportation is only 1 week. So it's a very short time. And what you have to know too, the possibilities of legal protection against Dublin decisions is very few. We will come to that later on when I tell you something about the legal protection. So, if we do not deal with the Dublin case, so there's no responsibility of any other member state, the asylum procedure continues with the appointment for the interview. The interview is you might say, the core piece, the heart of the asylum procedure, because the applicant is asked to tell everything about his personal experiences. It is the most important part. Therefore, in case of illness, the Bundesamt should be informed immediately about the inability to attend the appointment, and this should be proved with a doctor's certificate, so Bundesamt would be forced to make another appointment. It is, as I said, very important for the success of the asylum procedure that the applicant attends a proper interview. In the interview, an interpreter or translator will be present. The interpreters or translators are normally very professional, but the applicant should make sure that the translator understands everything and vice versa, so that the applicant understands the translator properly. Because otherwise, there's obviously a very, very big possibility of major mistakes. If the applicant has written advice about his experiences and his reasons of apply for acceptance as a refugee, these evidence should be presented at least in the interview, if not before. But if they are presented in the interview, it's not too late. Bundesamt always has to recognize every evidence that is given at least until their decision. It is possible in the interview that the applicant is asked questions that he already has answered. That is sometimes the reason if I see I should speak louder, is that correct? Okay, I will try to. If there are questions that are repeated, that does not normally mean that the Bundesamt did not believe the answer the refugee or the asylum seeker gave in the first interview, but it can be that the officer who makes the new interview just checks the whole questionnaire once again without checking if there were answers in the beginning. If there already have been questions in the beginning. Therefore, it is very important that the applicant follows his obligation to tell the truth, because otherwise, if there are different answers to the same question, it can damage the trust in his answers. Then now there's the next poll for the moment. What advice should be given to the applicant to act in the interview? There's only one answer correct. Okay, I see. I'm correct if I think there's no need to read the questions out loud, the possible answers out loud. Okay, as far as I see, we have a quite clear answer. Of course, answer number 3 is perfectly right. I will leave the poll for a moment. Of course, in the interview, the applicant has to explain his personal experiences, his personal reasons for fleeing from his home country, and his concerns and fears if he would be forced to get back. The answers should be as precise as possible, and I will come to some other advice later. I made up the other answers from advice people tend to give the applicants because of other reasons. There is absolutely no use for making up a story. Normally, and especially the officers from Bundesamt who deal with the interview and the case are specialized on the home country where the applicant comes from. So they know about the country of origin, and therefore there's no use to make up a story, because normally they are able to evaluate if someone makes up a story. Even if the translator and the officer are professionals, there is absolutely always a reason to check if the transcript of the interview is correct, because even the most professional person can make mistakes himself. And if the refugee is asked to sign the transcript of the interview, he shouldn't sign it if there are major mistakes in the interview where the officer does deny his wishes to change the mistakes. If that happens, the applicant should immediately search for help with legal help with a lawyer or with an advice center. Oh, that was wrong. Can we hide that? Okay. Here, some overview for advice for the interview. It is the opportunity to talk about all the reasons. You need extensive and exact descriptions that cover own experiences. General information is not important. There are 3 questions to help people how they shall describe what happened, and these three questions should be given to any applicant who asks, what shall I do in the interview? I normally, for my clients, use the metaphor that they have to imagine that the officer was not there where all the terrible things happened that forced somebody to flee, but the officer should be able to draw a picture or direct a movie that covers all the experiences of the refugee, and therefore the refugee it's not only needed that the officer is told how many people were there, but exactly what clothes they were, what uniforms they had, what weapons they had, so that the officer would be able to draw a complete picture of the situation. And then, of course, never make up answers or stories. It's necessary that it's even as well possible as necessary that the refugee takes his proper time for the answers, and always have the transcript retranslated and check the answers. After the interview, there is, of course, 2 possibilities. There can be positive decision or negative decisions. If there's a positive decision, and the applicant is recognized as an asylum with the right of asylum or as a refugee, he receives a residence permit, normally for the term of 3 years for the first time, and he has privileges concerning family reunion. He just has to utter the wish for family reunion within 3 months, either at the embassy, which would be in charge for the family reunion, or at the immigration service, the foreigners office, which is in charge for his case at the moment in Germany. And the last thing is that he will receive an unlimited residence permit after 3 years if he is still recognized as a refugee or has the right of asylum. The second possibility is that he is granted subsidiary international protection. Then he will receive a residence permit too, but he has, at least after the so-called Asylpaket 2, which was a legislative act which was set in force on the 17th of March, he has only restricted possibility of family reunion for the next 2 years. There is no possibility, or at least very, very restricted possibility, of family reunion for people with subsidiary international protection. And the last possibility is the prohibition of deportation, which results in a residence permit, or at least a suspension of deportation during the deportation is prohibited, but normally these people are not granted family reunion. The negative decisions that cause legal protection afterwards are a few. We will start with the last one here. If the decision, which is called Bescheid, which is an official decision by a federal office, says the asylum application has been refused as inadmissible. That is the decision for Dublin cases. We have a time limit for the normal apply against the decision and the immediate apply against deportation for only 1 week. If this time limit is exceeded, there is no possibility to get into proper legal protection once again. Then we have the normal rejection of the asylum apply, where it is said the asylum application has been refused and the status of a refugee is not granted and subsidiary protection is not granted without any qualifications. Then we have a time limit for a simple apply at court, where you just have to apply against the decision itself within 2 weeks. The apply then has protects the applicant from deportation. So it is only necessary to make the apply at court in a proper time, and you can reason the apply afterwards, normally within 1 month after the decision was given to the applicant. And the last possibility, or one of the possibilities, is that the application for recognition of asylum status or as a refugee has been refused as manifestly unfounded. That is a qualified rejection, which is mostly used nowadays for the people who hail from the so-called secure home countries, which is the whole region of the West Balkans, so Albania, Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in addition Ghana and Senegal. Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia are the German federal government wants these countries to be secure home countries, but at the moment that cannot be reasoned. When the application has been refused as manifestly unfounded, you again have only 1 week to react to that. If you make an apply against the decision itself, and another immediate apply to protect against deportation, which has to be immediately reasoned because the courts are set to decide within 1 week about the apply against deportation. I think I now overwhelmed you with information, with very much information, and therefore I thank you for your attention. And now Nadia will continue with her part of the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Henning. I hope you can all hear me well. There were some problems in the beginning with my microphone. Okay, so yeah, my name is Nadia Potthast. I'm a social worker at the Youth Facility Center for Unaccompanied Minor Refugees, and I am also a founding member of the initiative Angehört. My presentation will mainly be based on my experiences as a volunteer. I've been volunteering in the area of refugee support for 4 years now, and mainly my experience with Angehört. We inform people in the reception centers about the interview, which Henning has been talking about too. And yeah, as I said, as a full-time social worker, supporting underaged, unaccompanied refugees. My local focus will be mostly on Berlin and Brandenburg, because this is, actually where I work the most. On the bottom of this slide, you see the web pages, which I've been using a lot and which I also use for my everyday work. My presentation, I will start with the accommodations for refugees first. Then I will talk about some questions which refugees address to us during our visits in the centers where we go. And lastly, I will give you a short overview on the system or the process for unaccompanied minors when they arrive here in Germany, and with a special focus on Berlin again. So I will be talking about 3 different types of accommodations. Firstly, the reception centers. Secondly, the collective accommodation centers, and the emergency centers. Can you all hear me well, or do I have to speak up maybe a bit? Okay. Okay, I try to speak a bit louder. I hope this is better now. So the reception centers, there should be 1 reception center in each of the 16 federal states in Germany. There are some exceptions, for example, in Bavaria or North Rhine-Westphalia, because there are so many people coming there that they opened up more reception centers in these federal states. People live in the reception centers for a maximum of 6 months after their asylum application has been filed. And it depends on the federal state's law if people are restricted to stay in the reception center or in the district of the reception center. After their stay in the reception centers, the local foreigner authority tells people where they have to move. And here you see some pictures of the centers where we regularly go. The conditions in these centers are very different, I have to say. It always depends on the management of the center. Some offer regular German courses, for example, and also legal and social counseling. We also visited some centers where they don't offer any of this. Most people live together in 1 room, 4 to 8 people together. They get cooked meals, and the bathroom is mostly on the hallways. Yeah. Can I get the first? Yeah, thank you. So my first question would be, do you have an idea how many people live in a reception center? Okay. Some are still deciding. Okay, yeah. So you're right. It's we can close the poll. Thank you. It's 50 to 700 people who live in a reception center, and we also had the experience that in summer 2015 we visited one reception center where it was told that there were even 1,000 people living in one of the centers. Okay, let's move on to the collective accommodation centers. As I said before, after a maximum of 6 months, people are transferred to a collective accommodation center. Usually it's in the same federal state as the reception center, and the asylum seekers are obliged to live in the same municipality to which they have been allocated for the whole duration of their asylum procedure. Talking about the conditions in these centers again, we have experienced differences here again too. We found some centers where 4 to 5 people live together in one room and they share a bathroom and a kitchen on the hallways again. We found centers where only 2 people live together in one room and they have their own little bathroom and their own little cooking area. And some people don't have an access to their own kitchen, so they get cooked meals again. And we also found that there are accommodations, especially for families, where they have their own small flats even. And now can you show me the next poll, please? Yeah, so now I'm talking about the emergency centers. Maybe we can, make the poll a bit smaller. Thank you, so that you can see the pictures of the emergency centers. So my first question is, can you imagine why these emergency shelters have been set up? Do you have an idea? Oh, I am asked to repeat the question. Can you imagine why these emergency shelters have been set up? Yes, and I've seen already a lot of right answers. Yeah, as you imagined, right? These emergency shelters were built up because there was just so many people arriving, and in the reception centers there was not enough space for the people. And especially these photos are taken again from Berlin, from an emergency shelter which we visit on a regular basis. you can see that they're most in sports halls or also in tents. Yeah. And can we close this poll now and maybe already move on to the next poll, which is also a question concerning the emergency centers. What is, in your opinion, one of the main struggles people are dealing with in the emergency shelters? Yeah, again, you all put down right answers. Of course, there's no privacy for the people, and they are together in this small space, and conflicts come across. And also the conditions in the emergency shelters again depend on the management who's running the shelters. We also have a lot of people, or we also met a lot of people in these shelters who have been here already for 3 months, but they still didn't register for the asylum application, what Henning has been talking about before, the so-called BÜMA. So they were lacking also social support or even some medical treatments. They couldn't see a doctor or anything like this. Okay, thank you. I will now move on to questions which we as a group are often asked by refugees in the reception centers or in emergency shelters where we go. So one question which we are asked frequently is, when can I work? And the answer is that in theory, they are allowed to work after 3 months if they don't have to live in a reception center anymore. But in the first 15 months, no matter the status of the asylum seeker, there will always be a check if there's another European citizen who could do the same job, and then he would get the place. And the practical implementation is also quite complex because mostly people don't have enough German skills. Some certifications are missing or even qualifications. And there's also the lack of information about the skills of the refugees. And for German companies, it's a very high bureaucratic hurdle to take in order to hire a refugee. The second question is, when can I study? As soon as a person has left the reception center, they can enroll at a public university. Lately, there have been some organizations built up, for example, like the Kiran University, which also give the opportunity for refugees to enroll online or also to enroll to German courses online. A third question is when can I get my family here? Henning was already talking about this a bit before. And so during the first 3 months after a person has been recognized as a refugee, he or she can apply for family reunification. Again, as it was explained before, it depends on the status, on the asylum status this person gets. As family, it's only the spouse and the children under 18 who are counted as family and who can be brought to Germany. And for the marriage, it's also needed to show a proof document, an official proof document. Then the last question is, can I move to another city in Germany? When the person is still living in a reception center, he or she is not allowed to move to another city. However, she can apply to live with his or her close family. Again, close family refers to the spouse or to the children under 18 years of age. And when the asylum process is finished, it also depends on the person's asylum status, if he can move to another country or not. To another city in Germany, I mean, not country, sorry. And finally, here's a short overview of the procedure for unaccompanied minors when they arrive in Germany. First of all, if they arrive in a German city and, for example, they are registered by the police, they will be brought to a reception center, especially for unaccompanied minors. Here, the so-called clearing phase starts, which means that there's a check on health condition, physically and psychologically. There will be a conversation, a talk to see if the teenager is really under 18 years of age, if he or she doesn't have official documents. And ideally, there's already a place for a school found for the teenager or for the child, and also a legal guardian is already appointed. And the next step is that a youth welfare office is appointed to be in charge for this teenager, for the child, and the welfare office will look for an accommodation in a youth facility center. Concerning the situation in Berlin at the moment, in the past 2 years or one and a half year, there have been a lot of reception shelters being opened for unaccompanied minors. Some even live in hostels. Many schools have done a lot of effort to build up welcome classes for unaccompanied minors so that they are able to enter schooling directly. The problem is concerning Berlin that there are not enough legal guardians here for all the unaccompanied minors, and also that some youth welfare offices don't have the experience to work with unaccompanied minors, so the staff is not trained for this field, and they have to pick up a lot of information also concerning the asylum process. And at the bottom of this, I just put down 2 numbers which are from February 2016. So in the whole of Germany, we have 69,003 unaccompanied minors in the youth support system, and in Berlin there are 3,815. Yes, so this was my part of the presentation. I just like to end by saying that at the moment there are a lot of changes coming up, and we always try to keep up to date with all the details and proceedings. And if you are interested, you can click on this link I've put down there. It's from the BAMF again, because they are planning a new refugee management. And there you can see how this would work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. We have 2 questions. Could please you or Henning address these? So the first one is, what is the media situation and public opinion regarding refugees and their future in Germany?
I would try to make an effort to answer this question, if it's okay. Yeah, I think neither Nadia nor I are the real right persons to answer these questions because I'm a lawyer, and she's a social worker, and we are not media consultants. But at the moment, we have the situation that it is a little bit that the welcome culture that was to be seen in the middle of 2015 ceased, and we have a very ambivalent, a very ambiguous, feeling in Germany. There are very many people who still say, "Yeah, we will do this," and who still help many refugees. But there has been in the last in the last elections, elections for 3 federal states, a party has become very, very successful that is, let's say it friendly, very critical with refugees and immigration. And that is a reason to be concerned about the public opinion. But I still think the main public opinion still is open to accept and to welcome refugees. But
Yes.
especially in the media, the situation is shown, yes, as ambivalent. There is also the chances of migration are put into the foreground, but there's also media reports about the difficulties with immigration.
Yes, I actually don't have a lot more to add to what Henning said. I also have the feeling that this hype, I would say, of welcoming refugees has calmed down. But in general, I would say, the feeling is more positive towards the refugees. Yeah, it's a phase of uh, waiting and watching where it will go.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions. So the first one is it true that currently many asylum seekers apply for voluntary return and do not wish to stay in Germany? And if yes, what are the reasons they mention for their decision? Thank you.
Well, I think I can answer this question quite good because normally I come into play after negative decisions, or if asylum seekers already have the feeling that the decision could be negative. The first big group of asylum seekers, or normally denied asylum seekers, are from the from the countries of the Western Balkan. So the asylum seekers from countries like Serbia, Albania, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, who are at the moment receive frequent negative decisions, and due to the last 2 legislative acts. I'm sorry, one moment. The last 2 legislative acts, called Asylpaket 1 und Asylpaket 2, so Asylum Package 1 and Asylum Package 2, they realized that the German asylum and foreigners law doesn't make it easier for them to stay in Germany. There have been established very many restrictions for people whose asylum applies have been rejected as unreasoned or unfounded, manifestly unfounded. So these people normally realize that they do not have a very, very great perspective to stay in Germany, and they choose their possibility to reply voluntary. The point is that for these countries in the Balkan region, the legislative, the Asylum Package 1 established a possibility to return to Germany or to come to Germany via normal working visa. This possibility has been set in the legal regulations called Beschäftigungsverordnung, which is a code for business immigration, for working immigration. And there is now a possibility that people from the Balkan region can enter Germany, have at least chances to enter Germany with a proper working visa, and then come with their families and family reunion if they have established an economic base in Germany. That is one part of the people who leave on their free will voluntarily. The other part is, I think, a group of people who realized that they had wrong ideas of the asylum proceedings because the great amount of asylum seekers in the last month and especially in the last year caused very long proceedings, very long terms of waiting, and there still are people who misunderstand the asylum proceeding as a quick way to immigrate to Germany, and it isn't like that, and it became worse in the last year because of the legislative acts. And sometimes these are people who thought, oh well, when I come to Germany, I can apply for asylum, and then immediately I can learn German, and then I can study, and then maybe I can find work. But they made the mistake that you have to choose the right door to enter the way of migration to Germany, and that can be a reason too. Of course, nobody leaves leaves voluntarily just because he has no. Let me start the sentence in another way. The asylum seekers from countries like Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, they normally do not leave voluntarily. It's more like the people who came not for the core reasons of asylum and refugee status, which is restricted to prosecution or the reason for subsidiary protection, and the German asylum proceeding is explicitly not made up for poverty migration or to flee from the home country because of poverty and poorness. One might not like that, but that's the legal situation. And many people who realize that right now, they choose to leave voluntarily because then they do not receive prohibition and restrictions to still travel through Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henning. We have one more question. Let me read it. If a registration by a EU country is made in an illegal way, for example, fingerprints were taken by force in Bulgaria, is it a valid argument to refuse the asylum procedure?
Can I reread the question anywhere? Oh, there. I did not scroll. Where can somebody repost the question?
Yes, just a
Okay.
second.
It's
this
the
is-
question from Sarah Ristich. If there is a change, okay. The point is, the registration by EU country made in an illegal way, fingerprints taken by force in Bulgaria. You have to realize that that taking personal data is part of the asylum procedure. Just because an applicant does not want to be registered in Bulgaria, that does not prevent him from being registered there. And even in Germany, it is possible that police officers take fingerprints by force. So it is. I don't understand the question because I don't know how the asylum procedure is refused. It is a valid argument to try to deport the person to Bulgaria because according to the Dublin regulation, Bulgaria might be responsible for the asylum proceedings, but at the moment, according to most German courts, there is no deportation within the Dublin regulation to Bulgaria because of systematic mistakes in the Bulgarian asylum proceeding. Does that answer the question?
I think we have a comment from Sarah. She says at some point refugees were required to apply for asylum in Macedonia and Serbia and Croatia and so on in order to cross further the borders. And can these applications be used to deport them back? This is the additional comment.
I will try to answer the question too. Since Serbia and Macedonia are not European countries, at least the applications there cannot be used as an argument, as a reason to deport them to Macedonia or to Serbia. But Croatia is a EU member state, and there's at least the possibility that Dublin regulations conduct the deportation back to Croatia to deal with the asylum apply there. But I must admit, I haven't had the case of somebody who applied for asylum in Croatia and had problems with the Dublin decision then. I must admit I never dealt with this case.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Henning. And I have one more question from Celia. She asks, what are the chances for an unaccompanied minor who has an uncle or cousin or stepbrother in Germany to stay in Germany?
Okay, I will try to answer this question. What I know so far, or what I have experienced, is that maybe Henning can correct me if I'm wrong, that even if it is an uncle or a stepbrother or cousin, it doesn't really mean that the chances are higher. The unaccompanied minor has to go through the normal process as usual. A possibility could be that the uncle or the stepbrother or the cousin, if he's over 18, could apply for as a legal guardian.
Maybe I can give some additional information. Unaccompanied minors are normally not set into the Dublin proceedings. So if the unaccompanied minor is registered in Germany for asylum, if he reaches Germany, as Nadja told us, the unaccompanied minors are normally dealt with in the city where they are recepted, where they first are registered, and normally they will not be set into the Dublin proceedings. if there is any relative in Germany, according to the if there is any relative in Germany, it is a big possibility that this person has a very good chance to be set as a legal guardian for the unaccompanied minor, because the Dublin regulations sees the core family as the important as the important reason for somebody to be set into a certain country, but according to Dublin regulations, the member state still has the possibility to declare itself responsible, and it is one of the since in the Charter of the EU human rights, Article 24, paragraph 3 states that the welfare of the child always has to be one of the major reasonings for official decisions, and therefore it would be very difficult to not to have somebody who is in a family relation to the unaccompanied minor not being the legal guardian, and therefore the chances to stay in Germany are in this case quite high, I would say.
Thank you very much. I can see there are some people writing, but I would like to take this pause to ask you to fill in one more poll, please, to evaluate the webinar. Also, if some of you would like to request a certificate of attendance, please send us an email at info@childhub.org. Katarina is going to write it in the chat right now. And also, we are going to have more webinars, including on the topic of refugee and migrant crisis. And you can keep an eye on our announcements on the Child Hub website. On the webinar page, we will also put a link here now. And I will give you a couple of more minutes if someone else has a question. Otherwise, thank you very much for your active participation today, and thank you very much, Henning and Nadia. That was very interesting and very useful, at least to me, and I hope to others as well. And I hope we will have future webinars with you later on. And I wish you all a very nice afternoon. Thank you and goodbye. Oops, sorry, it's me again. We have one more question. There is Celia asking about rates about Pakistani children that apply for international protection. Can we address this quickly?
I can make this quite quick. I do not have any statistic information about unaccompanied minors from Pakistan. I do not have any cases like that.
Okay, that was quick indeed. Yeah. Yes, Nadia?
Unfortunately, it's the same for me. I don't have rates for Pakistani children. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you and goodbye.